If you are looking for some help building a website using Optimizely CMS 12, then this is the video for you. My name is John, and in this video I'm going to be giving you an end-to-end walkthrough of how to take a HTML template and completely content model it within inside of Optimizely CMS 12. So in this video, it's going to be quite high level. However, I'm going to go through everything of how to structure up your pages, how to structure your master layouts, how to call the metadata header footer, how to do things like add settings within the CMS, how to create the menu, how to create blocks, how to call other pages from other pages. So basically this video is going to cover everything that you need to know to basically build a website using Optimizely CMS 12. So this is probably going to be rather a lengthy video, probably about half hour, 40 minutes, who knows. Basically feedback from you guys is you like these long videos where I go into big, sort of drill into the details. So this video is for all of you ones out there. Now, if you haven't come across my video before, my name is John and I do these weekly YouTube videos which will basically help you as a developer become better at your job. So if you like things like productivity, Episerver CMS, Optimizely CMS, all of that sort of amazing good stuff, JavaScript, subscribe to this channel and I promise you, you will become better at your job. So, assuming you smash the subscribe button, let's start at the beginning and take a look at this template that we're going to model. In this video, we're going to be building my Optimizely 12 starter kit. And all the HTML is based on a theme that I've copied from this HTML5 up.net website. So as you can see right here, if you come over here, you're going to get access to say 50, 60 different free HTML templates. The one that I like is called Strongly Typed. So this is the one that we'll be using today. Now, if you want to play along at home and do it yourself, just click on this big download button. You're going to get all the images and assets. So our task is to take all of these assets and build it inside of Optimizely. Now, if you really want to play along at home, the starter kit that you'll be seeing today is also available to clone from my GitHub. So simply go over to John D. Jones, follow me because you want to be an absolute legend. And then from the homepage, you can see that I pinned it to make it easier. So from here, you can just simply look at the README, got a database that you can download. So it's very easy for you to set up and do everything at home. This website is also available from the cms12.john.jones.com. So you can have a look at this in production to see what it looks like. On the screen right now, you're seeing our finished product. So this is my Optimizely CMS 12 starter kit. We've taken that HTML and modeled it completely within Optimizely CMS. So let's walk through the process. Now, every single web page is basically going to be made up of 4 different parts. We've got our header, and in this header, we've got a menu. And as you can see, we've also got a mega menu, so things are a little bit more complicated. We're also going to have a footer right down the bottom. We've got some main content in the middle. And very importantly, and we shouldn't forget, is that we've also got a head section. So we're going to need to put some metadata on our page. Now, when we're using Optimizely CMS, we do all of our content modeling using a code-first approach. So what this means for you is that when you're creating your homepage and all these different types of models, you're going to be creating it by code. So as you can see here, I've created this class, it's called homepage. It's inheriting basically from something called page data. And then we're going to basically use this content type attribute right here to register it within the CMS. You need to give it a name. It's really important that you give it a GUID to uniquely identify it. So this can help with importing and exporting. You need to give it a group. So this is how you're going to see the page within the editor. And then you also need to use the available content types. So what pages can be created underneath it. And we're also going to give it a preview URL. In here, we can then model all of our properties. So as you can see, to do that, we use display. And it's very important when doing this that we use the public virtual on all of our properties. So that's quite a bit of a lot of information in one hit. So basically all of this stuff here, when you add it into your project and build it and run it, all of this is going to be added as metadata inside of the CMS. So if we launch the CMS and then we do a new page, you can see that in here we've got access to our home page. Now we've got home page and we've got this little blurred image. Now this completely, and as we see down the bottom, we've got the home page here, and it's in this common area here. So this completely maps to all of this information. So I'm pulling in that picture, and then from our picture we've got our home page, and we've got this group name. So as you can see, when we're starting to build up our content, adding all these different rules is super important. Now, when we're creating our home page, we can also create pages underneath it. And as you can see underneath here, we've got our blog listing page and our content page. And again, this models down to what I've allowed here. So we've got this available content type, and from here, I'm allowing the blog listing page and content page. So we can drill down into this in a little bit more detail later. The important thing is that when we create these page types in code, we're also going to have a controller. So within our CMS core project here, I've got a home page controller. Home page controller inherits from a page controller. It uses generics, so you pass in the type T, and then from here you'll get access to the home page item right here. Now, when we're doing CMS development, this is really important because the routing works very differently in a CMS compared to a normal vanilla .NET Core application. In normal .NET Core, basically a URL and the segments in the URL will map to the controller and an action. Within a Episerver Optimizely CMS site, segments in a URL is going to map to a page which is virtual in the database. So in the background, the default routing rules are very different from the CMS. So when a page request comes in, what's going to happen is in the background, Optimizely is going to try and find a match in the database. If it finds a match, it's going to figure out what page type it is. Now, based on that page type, it's then going to call a corresponding controller. So this is how you hook up your controllers to make everything work. Now, the interesting thing that we need to think about for our header and footer and our metadata, and that's the bit we're trying to focus on, is that for our controller, we're going to need a corresponding view file. So as you can see right here, hopefully, I've got a folder within my views called homepage, and inside it, I've got a file called indexed CSHTMLs. So clicking on this, the important thing that we want to note is that we're calling this thing called layout. So our header and footer, any of that stuff isn't actually created on a per page basis. We call it all in using this master layout. Let's have a look at master layout. So as you can see in my solution explorers, I've got this master CSHTML. So clicking on that, we're going to see some interesting things in here, I think. Now, this is where one of the differences between ASP.NET Framework and .NET Core, .NET 5, whatever you want to call it, comes in. So straight away you can see that we've got this await component invoke async metadata. I'm also doing the same with a header and a footer. And this is because in .NET Core, partial views are no longer a thing. So when you're rendering partial views, or what used to be partial views, and your blocks, you're going to be working with something now called the view components. So it works very similar, it's just called view components, and we'll get into the code in a little bit. Now, the way that I recommend you build your global layouts within the Episerver CMS or Optimizely CMS is that you do not type this view whatsoever. Now, this is very different to a lot of the sample sites, including the Foundation website. So let's have a look at that. So in the Foundation website right here, you can see this top line here where it says model, iContent, view, iContent. And what this basically does is it types this view to this content type of iContent. And what this basically means, and the reason why they do that, is as you can see in here, we're starting to do this model.currentContent. So typing the whole of your layouts will basically give you access to the current page. However, as you can see, there's loads of code in here. So we've got an if statement, we've got another if statement. Now for me, how do you actually unit test all of this logic? The answer is you can't. So this is why I think typing your master layout is a big code smell. So let's go back to our starter kit. And as you can see, I don't have any of this horrible if statements in here. All I've got is these calls to these 3 extra views to render out the information I need. So I recommend that you follow this approach because as you can see, my file is a lot cleaner compared to the foundation site. Now, the first thing we're going to do is look at this Invoke Metadata. And basically what's going to happen in here, if you can hopefully see, let's move this across, is I've got a folder called View Components. Now, in here, we've got some for the MVC and we've got some for Optimizely. So the one that we're going to be focusing on in this instance is the metadata view component. So clicking on this is basically, how you define these new sort of partial layout controllers. So you inherit from the view components, you implement this async task iView component result, do an invoke async, and then from in here, you can add in any of your code you need. So you can do dependency injection in here. So let's have a look at what I'm doing. Now, what we're trying to do with this metadata is render out all of the metadata within our page head section. So we're talking about all of this stuff here. Now, obviously, as you can see, the title here needs access to the current page object. Now, because we haven't typed our view model the way that the foundation site has, we need a way of getting access to the current page. And this is what basically this code here is doing. So what we can do with this bit of code is we're using the page route helper. Page route helper is going to give you access to something called page link. So this is going to be the current page. From here, you can then use something like the content repository, and you can get by page data, and then you'll get access to your page. And then from here, you're going to get access to all of the properties for your metadata. So using this approach, we've got access using page route helper for the current page. And then when we go back into our CMSs, if we go to our shared view, and then we go to the metadata one, which you can see right here, this, for your reference, is in a folder called shared, and then it's also in a folder called components. So if we're looking in the metadata one, you can see that I'm now passing in a view model, and I've got access to the current page title. So for me personally, this results in much cleaner code because everything within this controller, you can unit test it. My master CSHTML isn't cluttered with all this if statement. I'm not typing things, and if I'm honest, if you're using Episerver with say Episerver Commerce, trying to type your views can be a massive pain. So this allows for a much easier and flexible approach. Now, another thing which you can do when you start putting things in view components is cache it. So one of the issues with this foundation site, in my opinion, is that every single time the site runs, it needs to completely figure out how to do the header and footer on each page request. This is really inefficient. If you're getting lots and lots of traffic, then it's going to have to figure out this each time. So by using these view components and wrapping it in the cache tag helper, what will happen is the header will be calculated once, it'll be cached for 5 minutes, and then we won't need to calculate the header or footer anymore. So this is also more performant. Nice, right? So let's move on to the next section. So we figured out on our page how to render out all the metadata. Let's have a look at the header. So rendering out the header is kind of similar to rendering out our metadata. So as you can see here within my view, I've got a header component or view component, and in here I've got some HTML, and from here I'm basically got a big for each statement, and this for each statement is going to render out our navigation. Ooh. So let's have a look at how we're doing the code for this. So back in our view component folder, can't see that, let's move that. Back within our view component folder, within MVC, I've got the header view component. Now, the header view component is taking in a content repository and the page route helper again. So basically we're going to get access to our current page. It's also taking in this menu service. So menu service is going to get access to all of our menu items. So this brings the question, how should we build menus in Optimizely CMS 12? So there's a few ways of doing it. probably the most common pattern that most developers tend to use, which I don't personally like, is that they do a big sort of get children from homepage, and then on our pages here there'll be like a display in menu. So there'll be some sort of tick box in here which will be, oh there we go, display in navigation, and you're either going to tick it or you're not going to tick it, and then based on this value this is going to get your menu. Now obviously when you're building things like mega menus, this display nav ain't going to cut it. Also personally, I think, adding in this display navigation is really painful. Let's say you have a tree here with 30 pages, you only want to display like 4 or 5 things in the menu, you're gonna have to start tabbing through all your different pages, clicking all of these, doing all your publishes. Now this is the reason why I create a separate section underneath my root, so let's minimize that, you can see, and it's called menus. So the structure of this is menu container, then there's a menu page type, and then we actually have our menu items. So as you can see, we've got no sidebar, right sidebar, left sidebar, and as you can see, no sidebar, right sidebar. So this is how I'm getting and populating that menu. Now on the right sidebar, you can see that we've got a name, I've got a URL or link, and that's where the URL is going to go to, and I've also used a link item collection to create these sub menus. So if I do a quick edit, you can see that from here I can add in all these submenus. Now when it comes to the content modeling, let's have a look at these pages. So inside of our code again, within our pages, we've got this folder called a menu. Scroll it up hopefully so you can see that. And inside of the menu, we've got those 3 page types we just looked at. So menu container. Now menu container is using the available content type and it's restricting it to type menu page. We've got type menu page, and this is going to basically be a placeholder for all of our menus. So in this example right now, we've only got a header for a menu for the header. Now on most websites you're probably going to need a menu for the footer. It's also possible that you're going to have to build a few menus, say in your checkout page, that kind of stuff. So having this one area where you can build multiple menus is going to make a nicer experience for your content editors. You can give them a nice manual which says if you need to update a menu, basically just come to this section, build some pages, you can add in all these restrictions, so it's very easy for them to add it, and you can make sure that they don't do anything silly. So as you can see, we've got this menu page which has got a few properties. Now one thing worth pointing out is that if you want to model images within the CMS, you would create a property, you define it as a content reference, and then you use this UI hint hint.image. Finally, we also have our menu item. So this is actually the page type which is going to contain all of our data. So from here we've got the URL property to add in a URL. We're also using the required property. So this is going to make it mandatory. And then we've also got, if you can see, a property of type link item collection, and this is how we're getting all of our sublinks. So kind of get the pattern. We're going to create 3 page types in the menu which are going to live underneath root, and this is how we're going to put in that data. Now the next thing we need to think about is then how we're going to query this data from the home page. And like good little software developers, this is where we can use something like a service or a factory, depending on how you like to call things. So down here you can see I've got this menu service. So menu service is just basically a class, and then it inherits from this interface. Interface is nothing special whatsoever. It's just going to expose this menu if it eventually loads. There we go. So we've got interface, menu service, and then it's enumerable menu type of menus. Dead simple, right? So let's have a look at the code. So I'm pulling in the iContent repository. This is the Optimizely way of querying the CMS. So in our menus, what we're doing is using the content reference.root page. So this is a handy API to know about. So content reference root page. This is basically going to give us access to this thing right here. So using the content repository, we can query the CMS and I'm going to get all children which are of type menu container, and we're only going to create a first or default on that because we're only creating one. So that bit of code there is going to give us access to this thing. Now from that piece of content, we can then do another get children by menu page using the content link from the container that we've just got. And then I'm going to filter that out by a menu which contains the word header. So using this code, you can see that we're going to get access to this. And then as soon as we have this, it's very easy for us to then get the children. And that's exactly what we're doing there, get children menu items. Now, one thing we need to talk about is that we now have this menu service. You understand the pattern and how to get it. However, if we just go within our view components and we've got our header view component, if we try to run this code as is, we're going to get an exception. So we're using dependency injection here. We're injecting that iMenu service, so we've got access to it to get our menu right here. However, we need to register our interface with our dependency injection container. Now, in previous versions of Episerver 11 and below, this was all done using the structure map. But structure map, it's gone bye-bye. See ya! And instead, what we'll be doing now is using the .NET Core way of doing dependency injection. So in Episerver, there's probably a few ways of doing this. The easiest one is to create ourselves an initialization module. So in here, you can see I've got a folder called initialization module. We've got our dependency injection file here. So this needs to inherit the attribute module dependency. It needs to be of type service container initialization. From here, you need to implement the iConfigurable module. But the important thing is that you get access to this configure container method. And then from here, you can do context, services, and then I'm using add transient. So this is a different, this is a technique of dependency injection, which is basically going to create a new type of menu service for each request. And from here, you can do things like add singleton. There we go. There's also add scope probably. There we go, add scope. And there's another one which I can't remember. But this is basically how you're going to be doing your registering your dependencies in your Optimizely CMS. Simply create your initialization module, and then within configure container, you need to create this mapping. So as you can see, we've got the mapping of iMenu service to menu service. And this is basically how this section works, is that we've created all this structure within the CMS to add all this metadata. We've pulled it in using that service. We've registered that service using dependency injection. And then we've created this view components to render everything out. So this kind of covers the home page. Let's move on, mosey on down and look at what we've got next. So next up, we've got this kind of big content-y area. So in here, we've got a block, we've got a banner, we've got some blog pages, and then we've got the footer. So in Episerver or Optimizely, the way that we're going to create all of these components in a page is through something called the content area. So let us have a look. So we're going back to our home page. In home page, you can see that we've got this property. The property is of type content area. Now, one useful thing with the content area is just like we can do the available content types on a page level, we can also define at a block level what blocks can be added in here. So you can see that we've got the banner block, card container block, feature block, and blog area. So if we go into our CMS, go on to the home page, go to the add create a new block, you can see that this has all been limited just to these blocks. So again, when you're doing Optimizely CMS stuff, it's important to create a nice user experience. So you want to start locking things down like this. So we've got this content area. This is going to call these 4 different blocks. So creating blocks in Optimizely, very similar to creating a page. So as you can see here, we've got a banner block, we've got a blog area block, the card container, a card item, contact us, and feature. And if you'll notice, they're all kind of very similar. So to register a block, we use the content type. You need to implement from the block data. Should I zoom in a little bit so you can see? So yeah, you need to make sure that you inherit from block data, and then you need to add in the properties you want to model. So again, you use the display attribute. You can add in things like the name, group name, order. So you should always put these ones. You model a property, and remember, you always need to put virtual. So if you don't put this virtual, things are going to get modeled up. That's pretty much everything you need to do to model the blocks. So again, creating the controller, because we want to have our good MVC practices here, is all done using view components. So as you can see, we've got our view components, and I've got this little folder called Optimizely. So this is where all of our blocks are going to live. So in here, let's take a look at the banner view component. So all of this is kind of similar to normal vanilla .NET view components. The difference with Optimizely is that you're going to be getting this async block component. It's going to be taking a block type as T, so this needs to inherit from a block data. You then do this protected override async task I view component result, invoke component async, and another important thing is that you pass in this type. Now, I've got to admit, when I was setting all this up, this was a bit tricky. I was using Optimizely CMS version 12.03 or 4, something like that. I was trying to get this work and I was having no end of problems. It just didn't work for whatever reason. And after upgrading to CMS 12.2, I think, all of this started to go. So I was getting these warnings, cannot find method to override. So if you start noticing a similar type of issue on your production environments, I 100% recommend that you upgrade and have a look. And always, as you can see in the screen, .peak is your friend. So when you're using common Epi server development, it's very useful to start pulling in all your components, doing a search. If you're lucky, there you go, you can start looking at the code. So decompiling this code, you can see that we've got an async block component, which is very minimal. You can see, hopefully here, if I zooms in, that we've got this async partial content component that's taking, is of our type block data. So if we click on that, you can see that we've got this protected abstract task IView component. So this is the thing that we need to override to make it work. So this is how all of that magic is working. The takeaway from you is that basically we have this website here. There we go. The important takeaway is that if you want to create your view models, you can basically implement this controller. You do a await task from results, pass in a view and then model, and then within your CMS system, you're just going to create some views within shared components, and then you're going to create your matching view. So this is really simple. Nothing has really changed between MVC, ASP, .NET, and .NET Core. The way that you actually structure view components and partials is different and blocks. However, as long as you just follow the syntax, basically you just want to create a view model, pass it down to a view, all of that stuff works very similar. Now, the one thing that I would say is that when you're deploying code, potentially by default your view folder might not get copied as well, and this is a bit of a pain. So if I open up my Optimizely starter kit in verse code, one thing that you might need to do, which is important, is you might need to add this line here, which says copy Razor generated files to publish output directory. So if you're doing a web deploy, FTP publish, something like that, you might need to make sure that in your web project, so your CMS CS proj right here, you might need to add in this copy razor generated files to publish directory in order for it to work. Otherwise, you might not get access to your views and you'll get some weird view error in production. So let's quickly jump through these blocks so you can have a look at the different models. There's nothing too scary here. We've got our banner. We've got our blog area, which is going to be rendering our blogs. Card container. So in Optimizely, if you want to create a rich text string editor within the CMS, you use a property of XHTML string. What else have we got? CTA, URL. One of the important things to note about URL actually is that, say I just delete this quickly. What you'll notice is that when you pull in your types, you're going to have access to either using system security policy or using EpiServer. Make sure that you use EpiServer. If you do not do that, you might get some weird issues when the website starts compiling and people add content. So you're going to get some weird exception if you don't use the right using namespace for URL. Card item, again, XHTML string. Let's quickly take a peek of that. So let's go back to CMS, cancel, card, quicker edits. So this on the screen right here, this is our rich XHTML in action. Very beautiful. What else have we got? I don't think there's anything else that interesting here for you guys. As you can see, it's just going through and modeling things. Now, one of the things that we should probably talk about is going back to our website. You can see that we've got our page here, we've got another page, but we've got this component which is pulling in blogs. So these blogs are actually created within the CMS. So in the CMS, you can see that we've got our home page, and then we've got this blog listing page, and then we've got our blog 2 and blog 1. So all the data which is getting rendered on the home page is actually being pulled from this content page here. This is done again using that service architecture that we used for the menu. So in here you can see that we've got services, we've got this blog service. In blog service we've got an interface, so iBlog service, which I've created. So remember, when you're creating your own interfaces, you're going to have to then register this within your dependency injection. So we've got iBlog service, blog service. Hopefully you get the gist by now. Now, the good thing about this bit of code is that we're pulling in the iContent repository, and then we're doing, there's probably easier ways of doing this, but we're querying the home page using content reference start page. So if you ever want to get access to the home page, this little helper here with iContent repository, super useful. As you can see, if we've got nothing here, we're just doing an enumerable empty, just so our code doesn't fall over. And then we're just loading in all of our data and converting it into a view model. So pulling data from other parts of the CMS, pretty simple. Exactly the same as EpiServer CMS 11. We're just using iContent repository, and you can just use getChildren or get or whatever method that makes you happy. Now, that kind of brings us on to the footer. Now, for me, there's actually, we've got some footer here. Potentially this contact us form may be there, may not be there. We've also got some little bit of content. So probably we don't want to, hard code all of this. So this brings up a very useful point. Where do we store our global settings in Optimizely CMS? So out of the box, there isn't actually any default way to store settings inside of Optimizely CMS 12. They leave it up to you to decide. Now, the way that I recommend that you deal with settings is to create yourself your own settings page. So as you can see here, we've got a settings page, and on settings, if I click on it, you can see that I've got this footer components where I can add in this content area. So I've added in this contact us form block right here, and this is basically how I'm getting access to this global settings. So anywhere from my website, I can access this page and access my global settings. So let's quickly run through how that works. So we've got our page definition. So page definition in here is the settings page. Load, perfect. Now, one difference within our settings page, because it's a restricted area, I've added this access roles equals administrators here. So that's another useful content modeling tip to know about. Setting up this settings page, pretty similar to doing content modeling with any other type of page. Inherit from the page data, add in all of the properties you want, job done. And to access our settings, again, is done via a service that I've created. So you get the gist now. It's got an interface. You need to register it with dependency injection, and then we're using the content repository API right here to get access to the settings page using content reference.root page. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned actually is that, say for our home page, for our content page and our blog page, we're all going to need access to common metadata. And I haven't added this in the sample site yet, but as you can see here, we've got access to this SEO metadata. And all of these pages on blog listing, blog page, content page, they're all inheriting from SEO metadata. And SEO metadata is this simple base class. It's inheriting from page data. It's implementing this single property. And what this means is that when we're in the CMS, anything that you inherit from and you create a page from, so our blog listing say, we're going to get access to this SEO tab. So this is really handy if you want to have reusable components which are the same on every single page. Instead of having to manually create them all yourself, you can simply inherit from your pages when you're doing your content modeling. That covers everything that you need to know in order to do some content modeling within Episerver Optimizely CMS. So using this video, you can pretty much build any single epic website you want to, because now you have the tools in your toolkit to do pretty much everything that you need to know. Now, how did you find that? Was this a good video for you? Please leave your thoughts below. Now, if I'm being candid with you here, and this is what you get for keeping to the end of the video, this was the first website I built using CMS 12. It's only been out for a month, so Now, I did struggle a little bit to get this site up and running, and it did take me a little bit longer than I wanted to ideally. So I thought this process was going to take me about a day, 2 days. However, it ended up taking me close to just under 2 weeks. And I'm not saying this to put you off. However, if you're building a project using CMS 12, I would highly recommend you give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because it's so new, things are still changing. The documentation, it's not really there at the moment, which is kind of the reason why I do these videos. That if you bump into an issue, then be warned, there's nothing out there. So you're gonna have to either figure it out yourself, suck it up like a big boy or girl, or it, or you're gonna have to use .peak, ask on the forums, figure it out. And this is going to take you a little bit of time. So the two big issues that I encountered was, I think something might have changed between version 12.03.4 and 12.2. So basically I just had some code, couldn't get it working for ages. It was the view components. There was an error saying there was no suitable method to override. And all I had to do was upgrade the CMS and everything magically worked. So I don't know what happened, what changed. However, there was literally no notes. There's no release notes that I could find which said anything about it. So this is something just to be wary of. The other thing that I had issues was around the installation. So when I was running everything locally through IIS, it was fine and using Cassini, whatever it is. When I published everything onto my web server, everything went, it did not go well. And one of the issues was I was getting an error saying the ASP user database table didn't exist. And basically the database script hadn't run properly when I installed the CMS first time. This took me ages to figure out myself. Again, there was no information on the internets to help me, so just be aware that this is something you may encounter. Now, obviously I'm not saying this to put you off using CMS 12, but just give yourself that wiggle room in your project plan, because no one wants to be stressed out in life. We all want to be nice and happy. So that concludes the end of this video. Hope you've got some value from it. Now this is the midway of my CMS 12 series. I do these videos for you guys. I don't just want to waffle on in my office on a Saturday morning. I do these videos to help people out. So hopefully someone out there is finding value from this video. If you are trying to build a website using CMS 12, please leave a comment below on what type of video you'd like to see in the future. So would you like to see me do controllers? I don't know, events? I'll probably do a video on events. But yeah, what would you like to see me do a video of? Because it really helps me. Please leave comments. Also, if you haven't already, don't be an absolute numbnut. Don't be a numbskull. Don't be a dipstick. Hit that subscribe button. Smash it if you really want to, because that would mean the world to me. And quite recently, just hit 1,000 subs. I'll be doing a video on that shortly, so I won't talk about that now, but 1,000 subs, yeah. 1,000 subs, yeah. Now, I also do a weekly newsletter, so link below. If you want to get an update on my content and you want to learn more about CMS development, good practices, subscribe to that. You won't get spammed, it's free, no party foul. Aside from that, I hope you've had a great time watching this video. I know I have making it. Hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are, and happy coding.